when the Forsaken fleets returned. The signal reached Earth in fragments. At first it sounded like interference, a broken melody stretched thin across the black. But when engineers at the SolNet relay pieced it together, a message emerged. A woman's voice, trembling and raw. "This is the Erythra Dominion. The host has returned. Cities burning. Gods help us." Then nothing but static. For 12 hours, the council debated what to do. They reached the same conclusion they always did. Nothing. The Erythra system was officially outside the protected trade corridor. Non-intervention, they said, was a matter of galactic stability. Admiral Jonah Crest read the transcript twice before speaking. He had been at his post on the EAS Aurelius, docked above Europa's shimmering ice fields, when the message came through. He stared at the console until the letters blurred. His reflection in the screen looked older than he remembered. Deep-set eyes, a face carved by sleepless decades, and the weight of command. He poured himself a cup of bitter ship's coffee and stood at the viewport. Jupiter hung enormous beyond the glass, its storms turning in slow motion. It reminded him of the Erythra images, swirling clouds over cities burning like embers. The galaxy, he thought, never really changed. It just learned new ways to look away. Captain Mira Solane found him there. She was small, wiry, the kind of pilot who seemed permanently balanced between exhaustion and adrenaline. Her flight jacket bore patches from 3 fleets and 1 ship that no longer existed. "Sir," she said, handing him a data slate. Council sent their response, formal non-engagement order. Crest didn't move. They used that phrase again? Word for word. He turned, eyes narrow. How many times in human history have we said that before a graveyard was made? Solane hesitated. Too many. They stood in silence. Somewhere in the hall, the engine cycled, a deep metallic heartbeat. Crest finally said, "We still have a choice." "You mean disobey direct orders?" "I mean do what's right." The command deck filled with murmured conversations as the night shift ended. The crew of the Aurelius had learned to recognize that tone in their admiral's voice, the edge before a decision that would change lives. Commander Yara, their tactical officer, approached with a grim expression. "Fleet Command will pull our commission if we cross the quarantine line. You know that." "I do," Crest said. "But if we don't, 10 billion will die alone." Yara folded her arms. "You think they'd do the same for us?" Crest looked at her, tired but steady. "That's not the point." He turned back to the holotable. The Erythra system hovered above it, rendered in spectral blue. Each world glowed faintly, and then, as the transmission played, faded to red. He reached out and touched the last bright point. "Plot a course for Erythra Prime." A long pause followed. Then Yara said quietly, "Yes, sir." Down in engineering, Chief Technician Rami Brandt listened to the announcement crackle over the internal comm. "All hands, prepare for jump to Erythra coordinates." Brandt whistled low. "So we're actually doing this?" The young ensign beside him, barely 20, still with that nervous academy shine, asked, "Sir, why would we? Those coordinates are flagged black zone." Brandt wiped grease from his hands. "Kid, you ever seen someone drown while the lifeboats are tied up waiting for permission?" "No, sir." "Then you're about to learn what kind of ship you signed up for." Before the jump, Crest walked the length of the ship. It was tradition, superstition, really. You didn't ask others to risk their lives without reminding yourself who they were. He passed Marines sharpening their vibro bayonets, engineers arguing over coolant ratios, medics checking their trauma kits twice. In the mess hall, laughter sparked, despite the tension. The kind of laughter soldiers used to keep from thinking too much. Someone had pinned a note above the coffee machine. "If we die, at least we die caffeinated." Crest almost smiled. Humanity's humor was its last weapon. In the hangar, he found Solane inspecting her fighter, the Eclipse. She was scratching a small mark into the inner panel. "Superstition?" he asked. "Memory," she said. "One for every ship I've flown home in one piece." "How many marks?" She counted. 16. "Let's make it 17. Hours later, the fleet floated in formation at the edge of the Sol system. 3 cruisers, 2 frigates, and a carrier whose hulls still bore burn scars from the Altheon campaign. The void around them shimmered with charged particles. Crest stood on the bridge, watching the stars elongate into threads of light as the jump drives warmed. He thought of Earth. of the children playing under artificial skies, never knowing how thin that peace really was. Selene's voice came through the intercom. All squadrons report ready, flight paths uploaded. Engines nominal, Yara added. Jump calculated to within 3 microns, which means we might land inside a star or two. Brant's laugh echoed faintly from engineering. Wouldn't be our first time. Crest took a slow breath. All ships, engage. The stars folded in on themselves, and the Aurelius leapt into darkness. Jump transit was always a kind of dream. Time stretched and folded, light bled into colorless haze, and memory came alive in ways it shouldn't. Crest closed his eyes and saw flashes of another war. The siege of Europa, the burning seas of Titan, the day he ordered a retreat and left 2,000 behind. He remembered the silence after. He'd spent 20 years trying to fill that silence with orders, strategies, victories. None of it worked. Now the galaxy was making him remember why he joined in the first place. Not for glory, not for politics, for the sound of a voice crying out and knowing someone would answer. When the Aurelius dropped from jump, the crew gasped. The Erythra system spread before them like a wound in the stars. Crest leaned forward, jaw tight. Bring up visual. The hollow screen filled with a dying world. Clouds of ash circled continents scorched to glass. Lightning crackled through the upper atmosphere. A massive shadow, a host warship, drifted over the planet, its hull black as oil, its edges fractal and alive. Even through the vacuum, the ship seemed to hum. Selene whispered, "Gods, it's feeding." Crest said nothing. He'd seen orbital bombardments, but this was execution. Yara's fingers flew across her console. "I'm picking up scattered signals, civilian transports, distress pings. They're running blind." "Plot interception courses," Crest ordered. "Weapons hot." Brant's voice came over comms. "Reactors at 110%, Admiral. We're burning holes in the laws of physics down here." "Keep them burning," Crest said. The Aurelius angled toward the planet, thrusters flaring. Every alarm in the ship screamed as enemy fire lit up the void. The first salvo cut through the flank of their escort frigate, EAS Kenzai, splitting her in half. Debris blossomed into fireballs. Crest gritted his teeth. "Get the Kenzai's pods." "Already moving," Selene shouted from her console. Her fingers danced across holographic keys. "Launching retrieval drones. 3, 2, 1. Tiny flashes streaked into space, catching the escape pods before they drifted too close to enemy lines. On the comm, voices crackled. "This is Pod 7. We're hit. We're losing." Static. Crest turned away. "Maintain formation. Focus fire on their nearest carrier." The Aurelius's forward guns opened up. Tungsten slugs and plasma rounds cutting into the host's shielded hull. The impact made the entire ship shudder like a struck bell. In the chaos, Selene's squadrons deployed. Dozens of fighters fanned out, their engines leaving trails of white fire. She took point, voice calm despite the noise. "Vanguard wing, Titan formation. On my mark, mark." They dove together, slicing through a cloud of enemy drones. Explosions flared around them like fireworks from hell. For 3 hours, the battle raged. The Erythra sun dimmed under the debris field. Inside the ship, medics ran triage lines down the corridors. The smell of smoke and coolant mixed with the sharp tang of antiseptic. Crest moved through it all like a ghost, giving orders, touching shoulders, steadying hands. The crew looked to him the way sailors once looked to lighthouses, for direction, not warmth. When the final wave broke and the host withdrew temporarily, the silence was worse than the noise. Crest slumped into his chair. "Report." Yara exhaled. 5 ships lost, 12 damaged. Civilian convoy, 2 confirmed rescued, 4 missing. Casualties? Too many. He nodded slowly. "Find survivors. We're not leaving anyone." Hours later, deep in the medbay, Crest met the last surviving Erythra envoy, a figure of translucent crystal skin and soft luminescent veins. She lay on a biobed, breathing shallowly. Her eyes opened when he approached. They were like prisms, catching light and breaking it into rainbows. "You are human," she whispered. Her voice sounded like chimes struck underwater. "Yes," Crest said. "Why come here?" "You're kind, exiled, because we know what it means to be forgotten." She studied him for a long time, and something like sorrow flickered through her crystalline face. "Then perhaps we are kin." Her hand, fragile as glass, reached toward him. He took it gently. It felt warm. When he left the med bay, Selene was waiting in the corridor, leaning against the bulkhead with a bandaged arm. "She's their leader, right?" Selene asked. "She was." "And now?" Crest sighed. "Now she's all they have left." Selene looked past him, toward the sealed door. "What happens next?" "We rebuild," Crest said, "or die trying." She smiled faintly. "Figures you'd say that." The Aurelius orbited the edge of a dead sky. From space, Erythra Prime looked like an ancient wound, a marble of black and red, its clouds bleeding rust into the stratosphere. Lightning flared across the horizon, brief and furious, and the continent-spanning fires below pulsed with the rhythm of dying cities. Admiral Crest stood at the forward viewport and tried to breathe through the thickness of what he saw. He'd been a soldier for 3 decades, and yet the silence of genocide still caught him unprepared. It was the quiet that hurt most, the absence of anything that could be mistaken for hope. Commander Yara approached from behind, datapad in hand. "Orbital scans confirm total planetary collapse," she said quietly. 80% of settlements vaporized. Remaining population density, negligible. Crest nodded once. "And the host fleet?" "Half a dozen dreadnoughts in low orbit. Smaller escorts positioned between the moon and the atmosphere. They're hunting stragglers." He turned to her. "Any survivors?" Yara hesitated, the glow of the console reflecting off her face. "A few escape pods and civilian shuttles scattered across the upper atmosphere. They're transmitting weak distress pings. Most are out of power." Crest's jaw tightened. "They'll fall out of orbit soon." He turned to the crew pit. "Helm, put us between those shuttles and the host line. Tactical, prep countermeasures. I want those people out alive." The helmsman glanced up. "Sir, that'll put us inside their engagement range." Crest didn't blink. "Then we'll just have to outlive them." Down in the launch bay, Captain Mira Selene ran a gloved hand over the curved fuselage of her fighter. The ship was sleek, gunmetal gray, streaked with burn scars from the last engagement. The name Eclipse was etched across the nose in neat block letters. She tapped the lettering twice, a ritual from old Terran pilots, a way to remind herself that she was still alive and the ship still wanted her to be. Her second-in-command, Lieutenant Karutan, appeared beside her with his helmet under one arm. "So," he said, "we're doing the suicidal thing again." "Seems to be our specialty," she said. "You ready?" "I was born ready." "You were born in a mining dome on Europa." "Same thing," she grinned, sliding her helmet on. "Then let's go remind the galaxy what crazy looks like." Moments later, the launch catapult hurled their squadron into the void. The acceleration pinned her against the seat, and the stars snapped into long streaks before resolving into the broken sky of Erythra Prime. Below her, the planet churned in clouds of flame. "Eclipse 1 to all units," Selene said, her voice steady through the comms. "Escort formation Delta. Target priority, civilian vessels. Anything breathes on them, you burn it." A dozen voices answered in unison. "Copy that, Delta." She angled the fighter down, engines roaring. Host interceptors rose from the darkness to meet them, shapes like shards of obsidian, wings flickering with unholy green light. "Targets inbound," Karu called. 17 of them. "Make it 16, Selene said, squeezing the trigger. Her plasma cannons lanced through space, carving through the lead interceptor. It split apart like black glass, molten fragments spinning into the void. On the Aurelius, alarms shrieked. Yara's console glowed crimson as enemy fire locked onto their position. "Multiple rail impacts," she shouted. "Forward shields at 72%. "Return fire," Crest said evenly. "Target their carrier spine. I want that monster blind." The main cannons fired. 3 synchronized flashes of blinding light. The recoil shook the deck. Out in the black, one of the host carriers flared, its midsection sheared in 2. "Direct hit," Yara said, eyes widening. "That'll get their attention." "Good," Crest said. "They can give us their full attention." Another tremor rolled through the ship as the host fleet retaliated. The deck lights flickered. A status alarm screamed somewhere below, muffled by distance. "Engineering, report," Crest barked into comms. Brandt's voice came through, clipped but calm. "We're still breathing, sir. Lost a coolant manifold in Reactor 3, but nothing we can't patch with duct tape and prayer." "Use both," Crest said. "We're not done yet." The battle stretched into hours. Every few minutes, the Aurelius would roll on its axis, fire another volley, or dive behind the burning husk of a host frigate for cover. The void outside was filled with drifting debris, ruined ships, frozen bodies, and fragments of the planet's shattered moon. Selene's squadron moved through it all like ghosts. Her hands trembled, but not from fear, from the strain of focus. Her fighter's AI chimed softly, warning of heat overload, and she ignored it. "Stay with me," she murmured. "Just a little longer." Through the static came a new voice, soft and panicked. "Anyone, please. We're hit. Life support failing. This is Transport Ainan's Grace." Selene's eyes snapped to her HUD. The signal flickered near the upper atmosphere. She keyed the comm. "Ainan's Grace, this is Eclipse 1. I've got your beacon. Hold position. Can't. Falling. Too much damage." "Karu?" she said. "Form on me. We're going after them." He hesitated. "That's inside the storm layer. You'll lose signal. Then we'll find it again." She plunged the fighter into the storm. Lightning tore across the canopy. The turbulence hit like a hammer, tossing her against the harness. The clouds around her glowed with plasma discharge. The instruments screamed warnings she ignored. Then she saw it. A massive civilian transport tumbling through the storm, one engine trailing fire. "Visual confirmed," she said, voice strained. 200 life signs on board. She throttled down, matched spin, and fired a grappler line. The cable shot out, magnetic clamps catching the hull. "Got you." Karu's voice crackled. "You can't tow that thing out. Watch me." Her fighter strained, engines flaring blue. Slowly, painfully, the transport's descent slowed. The storm howled around them. When they finally cleared the upper atmosphere, her entire frame was shaking. "Eclipse 1 to Aurelius, rescue successful," she gasped, requesting recovery vector. The bridge erupted in cheers. Crest exhaled. "Bring them home." Hours later, the wrecked civilian transports floated in the Aurelius's shadow, locked to docking clamps like wounded whales. The medbay overflowed. Crest walked among rows of cots, each occupied by survivors. Erythra civilians wrapped in thermal blankets, eyes dazed, translucent skin marred by fractures that pulsed faintly with light. The air smelled of antiseptic and ozone. Machines hummed quietly. Doctors moved like shadows, their voices soft. One of the refugees reached for his sleeve as he passed. A child, barely half his height, crystalline veins glowing faintly blue. He knelt beside her. "You're safe now," he said. Her voice was like a bell chime. "You came for us," he nodded. "That's what we do." Her eyes filled with tears, refracting the medbay lights into tiny rainbows. "No one ever comes." He couldn't find an answer for that. Later he found Selene outside the observation deck, helmet tucked under her arm. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. The stars reflected off the glass, turning her eyes silver. "You pulled off a miracle," he said. She gave a weary smile. "More like stubborn physics. Still counts." They stood in silence for a long moment, watching debris drift across the horizon. One of the host ships still burned in the distance, a slow, smoldering ruin. Selene finally said, "They'll come back." Crest nodded. "Yes. And when they do?" He glanced at her. "Then we'll remind them why humans still scare the dark." The next day, scouts found an intact Erythra frigate hidden behind the planet's shadow. It was barely functional. Its hull cracked open like an egg, but inside they found data cores, recordings of the invasion. Crest watched them in the briefing room. The footage showed the host fleet descending without warning, black ships blotting out the sun. Their weapons didn't just destroy, they unmade. Buildings dissolved into ash, life turned to vapor. It wasn't war, it was cleansing. He turned off the display. "They don't want conquest," he said quietly. "They want silence." Selene leaned forward. "Then we make sure they never hear it." Crest almost smiled. "You really have a talent for understatement." She shrugged. "You trained me." Outside the viewport, the Erythra sun flared weakly behind layers of dust. The Aurelius floated among the ruins of a civilization, surrounded by drifting wreckage that glittered faintly in the half-light. Each fragment, Crest thought, had once been a life, a home, a heartbeat. The ship's AI broke the silence. "Incoming transmission. It's weak, but local." "Put it through." Static, then a voice, alien, resonant, exhausted. "This is High Sage Alaravec of the Erythra Dominion. To any who hear this, our world is gone, but the children live. Whoever you are, thank you." The signal faded. Crest stood motionless, then said, "Find her." Yara blinked. "Sir?" She's alive somewhere down there. We're not leaving until we find her. The crew exchanged glances. No one argued. By the third day, rescue teams were combing the shattered surface in atmospheric skiffs. The air was toxic, filled with fine black dust that clung to everything. Brant joined one of the missions, helmet fogging from his own breath as he waded through the ruins of a city once made of light. "Never thought I'd see this," he said over the comms. Streets turned to glass. "It's like walking through a frozen explosion." His partner's voice came through, static-laced, picking up faint life signs in the substructure. They moved deeper, flashlights cutting through the haze, until they found a collapsed hall half buried under molten stone. Inside, a group of Erythra survivors huddled together, their bodies dim but still glowing faintly. Alara Vek stood among them. When Brant approached, she raised her head slowly. "You're the humans," she said. Her voice was cracked but strong. "The Deathborn." He hesitated. "We prefer the term Terran, ma'am." Her lips curved faintly. "Names are for the living." He touched his helmet comm. "Aurelius, this is Recovery Team 6. We found her." Back aboard the ship, Crest met Alara in the medbay. She sat upright now, her body threaded with faint light from embedded medical conduits. Her crystalline hair reflected the sterile lamps above. "I saw your world," she said softly. "So bright, so alive. How did you keep it from devouring itself?" Crest gave a tired half-smile. "We didn't. We just learned how to survive it." She tilted her head. "And now you save others? When we can." Her eyes met his, unrateable. "The host will not stop. They see life as infection. They will burn until there's nothing left to cleanse." Crest folded his arms. Then they picked the wrong infection. That night he recorded a personal log. It was something he hadn't done in years. "We came here expecting another war. Instead, we found a graveyard and a choice. The Erythra fought alone for a century. No one came. Now we stand where they fell. And I can't shake the feeling that all of this is a mirror. Maybe the galaxy left us behind for a reason. Maybe they were right to fear us. But if mercy is something they've forgotten, then maybe fear is the only language left that still saves lives." He paused the recording, looked out at the stars, and whispered, "Tomorrow, we start rebuilding." Days had passed since the last exchange of fire. Wreckage floated like silent monuments, twisted hulls, frozen figures, shards of glass that had once been cities. The host fleet had retreated beyond the system's edge, perhaps to regroup, perhaps to hunt elsewhere. No one could tell. The sky was quiet now, but it wasn't peace. It was the stillness after a scream. Inside the ship, the corridors smelled of disinfectant and recycled air. Every wall hummed faintly with the pulse of overworked reactors. The crew walked slower now, talking softer, as if afraid to wake the ghosts outside. Admiral Crest hadn't slept since the recovery mission. He stood in the observation lounge, staring at the broken world below, a cup of black coffee cooling in his hand. The surface of Erythra Prime was streaked with crimson light, lava rivers glimmering beneath the ash clouds. It looked almost beautiful from up here, in the way storms could be beautiful from a safe distance. He didn't feel safe. The door hissed open behind him. Selene stepped in. Her uniform rumpled, dark circles under her eyes. She joined him at the viewport without speaking. 3 days since the battle, she said finally, and still no sign of the host. "They'll be back," Crest said. "They don't stop until everything stops breathing." Selene sipped from a ration flask. "You think the Council will send backup this time?" Crest's mouth twitched. "The Council will send condolences and a reminder about unauthorized humanitarian action." She smiled faintly. "They really hate that word. Humanitarian? Unauthorized." Below decks, the med bay overflowed. The Erythra survivors were like living glass, crystalline forms refracting the sterile light into soft blues and golds. Some were missing limbs that hadn't bled but had cracked, leaving edges that shimmered like fractured crystal. Human medics moved among them, clumsy but careful, speaking in hushed voices. Dr. Haviland, a compact woman with hands that never stopped moving, was the only one who seemed unshaken. She directed her team with short, efficient gestures. "Watch the pressure," she told a young medic. "Their vascular structure isn't fluid-based. You push too much and you'll collapse it." The medic blinked. "So, they don't bleed?" "Oh, they bleed," Haviland said. "Just not the way we do." In one corner a child whimpered, Its body pulsed dimly with pain, light flickering across its surface like a candle in wind. A human nurse crouched beside it, gently humming an old Terran lullaby. The tune echoed softly through the room, ancient, fragile, familiar. At the center of it all sat High Sage Alara Vec, propped upright by translucent supports. Her crystalline skin bore deep fractures webbed with faint silver filaments, medical grafts that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. When she spoke, the sound was faintly melodic, like the echo of a bell. "You risked yourselves for us," she said to Dr. Havlin, her gaze unfocused but steady. "Your admiral defied the council. Why?" Havlin wiped her hands on a cloth. "You'd have done the same." Alara tilted her head, curious. "Would we?" Later that day, Crest visited the medbay again. He paused at the door, watching before entering. Something about Alara's presence made the air feel heavier. Not oppressive, but sacred in its fragility. She turned her head slightly. "You command this vessel?" she said. It wasn't a question. "I do." "You could have turned away." "I've done that before," he said quietly. "Didn't like the ending." She regarded him for a long moment. "You are Deathworlders." He gave a short laugh. "That's what they call us." "Because your world kills you?" "Because we kill back." Her expression didn't change, but her light dimmed slightly, as if in thought. "And yet you save." Crest looked around the room, at the humans tending aliens, at the strange mixture of laughter and grief that filled the air. "Because no one else will." In the mess hall, words spread quickly. Humans being what they were, it took less than a day for the crew to start trading with their Erythra guests. Someone brought a pot of Terran coffee to the medbay. In return, an Erythra artisan offered shards of crystal that resonated faintly when touched. By the next shift, the Aurelius had developed a rhythm again. Strange, fragile, but alive. Brant found himself repairing a damaged Erythra sensor array alongside one of their engineers, a tall figure with silver-threaded arms. The alien hummed as it worked, each note causing faint vibrations in the metal. Brant frowned. "You're tuning it by ear?" The Erythra gave him a puzzled look. "By resonance, we hear the alignment," he whistled softly. "Wish my team could do that." The alien's tone shifted, a sound like amusement. "You make light from fire and engines from thunder. We envy you." "Funny," Brant said. "We envy anyone who doesn't make their living getting shot at." They both laughed. Or the Erythra equivalent of it. And for a moment, the gulf between species felt smaller. In the evenings, when the artificial lights dimmed, Crest began taking walks through the ship's lower decks. The Erythra had started carving patterns into the bulkheads, gentle spirals and flowing lines that glowed faintly in the dark. It should have bothered him, the defacement of military property, but instead it made the corridors feel less like a warship and more like a cathedral. He found Alara there one night, standing before one of the carvings. Her light pulsed softly, a heartbeat within crystal. "You shouldn't be up," he said. She smiled faintly. "I don't need rest as your kind does. Our bodies renew through reflection." He nodded slowly. "Reflection sounds nice. Haven't had much of that lately." She traced a fingertip along one of the glowing lines. "You have ghosts." Crest hesitated. "A few. Do they speak?" "Only when I try to sleep." She turned to him. "You carry guilt. Command comes with souvenirs." "Guilt is not a souvenir," she said softly. "It's a chain." He stared at her for a long moment, unsure whether to be angry or grateful. "You don't waste words, do you?" "Waste is a luxury of the living," she replied. In the command room, Yara was cataloging what remained of the Erythra data cores. The alien script was fractal, recursive, each symbol nested within another like thoughts folding on themselves. She leaned back, rubbing her temples. Whoever designed this hated translators. Selene leaned over her shoulder, chewing on a ration bar, or they didn't want anyone reading their diary. Yara smirked. Maybe both. But then, as the screen scrolled, an image flickered to life. An ancient schematic of a weapon or perhaps a defense system, massive and organic in shape. Beneath it, faint coordinates blinked. Selene frowned. "That's inside the planet." Yara nodded slowly. "A buried facility. Maybe a bunker. Maybe worse." They exchanged a look. "Should we tell the Admiral?" Selene sighed. "He'll find out anyway. Might as well ruin his evening properly." Crest studied the projection in silence. If this is real, he said, it could be what the host was after. Alara stood across from him, her light dimmed to a thoughtful glow. It is the heart of Erythra, she said. Our forebears built it long before memory, a machine that held the balance of our world. It governs tides, seasons, gravity itself. Yara blinked. You mean it's planetary control? In essence, it is also the source of our life force. The host seeks such power to consume, not to understand. Selene leaned against the table. So if they get it, everything ends, Alara finished softly. Crest straightened. Then we stop them. The decision came quickly. The Aurelius would descend into the upper atmosphere and deploy a joint strike team to the surface. The risk was enormous. The planet's crust was unstable, the radiation lethal without heavy shielding, but Crest didn't hesitate. He assembled the team personally. Selene for recon, Brant for engineering, and a squad of Marines for defense. Alara insisted on coming. You're not a soldier, Crest told her. No, she said, but I am the memory of those who were. He wanted to refuse, but there was something in her voice that made it impossible. They descended in a storm. The shuttle rattled as debris struck the hull, each impact sending vibrations through the frame. Outside, lightning flashed in sheets, turning the sky a molten red. The ruins below were black silhouettes against rivers of fire. Solange kept her hands steady on the controls. Atmospheric density's off the charts, she said. Feels like flying through soup. Just keep us in one piece, Crest said. No promises. They broke through the clouds and saw what was left of Erythra's capital, a vast crater surrounded by half-melted towers. At its center, a faint glow pulsed from beneath the surface, rhythmic and slow. Alara pressed a hand against the viewport. The heart, she whispered. It still beats. They landed near the edge of the crater. The ground was hot enough to warp the shuttle's landing struts. Ash fell like snow. The wind carried the faint sound of something moving, the echo of ancient machines still struggling to live. Brant set up scanners. Readings are off the scale, Admiral. Whatever's down there, it's alive. Crest adjusted his respirator. Alive or just refusing to die? Alara stepped forward, eyes fixed on the glowing fissure. Both. They descended into the chasm, following a narrow tunnel carved through obsidian. The walls were etched with spiraling symbols that emitted a faint, ghostly light. The air grew warmer the deeper they went. By the time they reached the bottom, the walls were vibrating, a steady pulse that matched the beat of a heart. The chamber opened into a cathedral-sized space. At its center rose a massive crystalline structure, half organic, half machine, suspended in a web of light. Energy arced across its surface like veins. Alara approached slowly, awe in her voice. The heart of Erythra. Brant stared up at it. I've seen fusion cores smaller than that. Selene muttered, please tell me it's not going to explode. Crest said, that depends who gets to it first. The ground shook. From the far side of the chamber, shapes began to emerge. Host drones, skeletal and glistening with oily light. Their limbs unfolded like blades. Their faces expressionless. The air filled with a low hum that resonated in the bones. Contact, Selene shouted, drawing her rifle. Crest raised his weapon. Hold the line. Plasma fire filled the chamber. The sound echoed like thunder trapped in stone. The host drones advanced without hesitation, their bodies reforming even as pieces were blown away. Brant ducked behind a column, swearing, they're regenerating. Then shoot faster, Selene snapped. Alara lifted her hands and light flared from her palms, pure, blinding radiance. The host faltered, momentarily stunned. They feed on life, she said through clenched teeth. But not all light is theirs. Crest seized the moment. Brant, disable the chamber entrance. The engineer slammed a detonator against the wall. Explosions roared through the tunnel, sealing the exit behind molten rock. The sound faded, replaced by a low, rhythmic pulse. The heart itself began to respond. Its glow intensified, energy coursing through the chamber like a living storm. Alara fell to her knees, trembling. It recognizes me. What does that mean? Selene asked. Alara looked up, light spilling from her eyes. It means I can make it fight back. They held the line for what felt like hours, defending the heart as Alara interfaced with the ancient machinery. Crest could feel the vibration in his chest, the pulse syncing with his heartbeat. The host drones disintegrated one by one, collapsing into shards of black glass. When it was over, silence returned. Alara stood at the center of the chamber, surrounded by fading light. Her voice was quiet but steady. It will hold, for now. Crest lowered his rifle. Then we've bought ourselves time. She looked at him. Time is all life ever buys. When they returned to the surface, the storm had broken. The sky was clearer, the air less toxic. From orbit, the Aurelius reported that the planet's seismic instability was decreasing. The heart had stabilized the core. As the shuttle lifted off, Selene looked down at the ruined city. What happens now? She asked. Crest stared through the viewport, expression unreadable. Now we see if mercy can build what vengeance couldn't. The Aurelius became a city of ghosts and miracles. For 2 weeks, it orbited the wounded world, half ship, half sanctuary. In its corridors, languages mixed, tools clattered, and sparks of rebirth flickered where despair had ruled. Humans and Erythra worked side by side, not in alliance decrees or diplomatic ceremonies, but in the shared exhaustion of survival. The warship's hangar bays turned into workshops. Human engineers stripped wrecked drones for components, while Erythra artisans hummed over shards of crystal, fusing light into new shapes. It was an orchestra of sparks and song, metal and music, sweat and shimmer. Rami Brandt was everywhere at once, shouting orders, crawling through vents, patching coolant lines with his bare hands. He'd started calling the hybrid technology Frankenlight, a name that somehow stuck. "Careful with that coil," he barked at a young Erythra technician whose arms glowed faintly with silver current. "You overload it, and we'll be orbiting 2 planets at once." The alien paused, clearly puzzled. "Is that possible?" "Don't find out," Brandt said, grinning. "Not without telling me first." He turned, wiping his forehead, and caught Alara watching from the catwalk above. She stood poised, serene, her crystalline robes faintly luminous in the dim light. "You create without knowing what you create," she said, voice soft but curious. "Does that not frighten you?" "Every damn day," Brandt said. "That's how we know we're doing something new." Her light brightened, the Erythra sign of amusement. "Perhaps that is why you survive where others fade." "Maybe," he said, glancing at the tangled machine below. "Or maybe we're just too stupid to quit." Admiral Crest spent those weeks in a constant blur, issuing orders, fielding repair reports, coordinating the joint fleet that was slowly, impossibly taking shape. He slept in his chair more than in his quarters, waking to the sound of engines humming and distant laughter. It wasn't the laughter of soldiers anymore. It was something lighter. Human and Erythra voices mingled, sometimes tentative, sometimes bold. And for the first time, he thought he heard hope in it. On the 13th day, he found Alara standing before the viewport in the observation lounge. The planet below glowed faintly blue again, its storm clouds thinning. She turned as he entered. "It lives," she said. Crest nodded. "Thanks to you." "Thanks to us," she corrected. "Your species has a strange relationship with death. You treat it as a challenge." He smiled faintly. "It's never been a good negotiator." She studied him, light pulsing with slow rhythm. "And yet, for all your power, you fear silence. Because silence," Crest said quietly, "is what comes when we stop fighting." Her head tilted, reflective. The hosts do not fight, they simply erase. Perhaps that is why they have forgotten how to live. He looked at her. "Then let's remind them." Captain Selene was in the hangar bay, supervising flight drills. Her squadron, now half human, half Erythra, looked like a patchwork of color and chaos. The new ships were hybrids, sleek Terran frames embedded with luminous crystal veins. They sang when they powered up, a low harmonic vibration that could be felt in the chest. Selene loved it. "All right, rookies," she called out. "We're not just flying, we're performing art with consequences. Keep your vectors tight and your egos smaller." One of the Erythra pilots tilted his head, puzzled. "Define ego." "Too late," she said. "You'll learn it when you crash." As she climbed into her fighter, Karu's voice came through her comm. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" "I've always enjoyed impossible odds," she said, strapping in. "It's how I know I'm still human." Later that evening, Crest convened a council meeting in the strategy room. Alara attended as an equal, her presence radiating soft light that bathed the metallic chamber in shades of silver blue. Around the table sat officers from both species, human marines, Erythra tacticians, engineers from both worlds. The hollow display above them showed the new fleet, Last Light, as Selene had named it. Crest began simply. The host haven't returned yet, but they will. When they do, they'll bring more ships, more firepower, and no hesitation. He gestured to the hollow. We have 20 vessels capable of combat. Half are hybrids. We can't outgun them, but we can outthink them. Yara tapped the console. The hologram shifted to display gravitational fields and orbital lines. If we position ourselves here, she said, we can use the planet's magnetic field to scatter their sensors. An Erythra strategist added, and channel the heart's energy through the crystalline network, a pulse strong enough to disrupt their organic systems. Crest nodded. Good. Then we fight smart. We hit hard, and when we fall forward. There was silence, then murmurs of assent. No one objected. They all knew what was at stake. That night, Crest found himself in his quarters, unable to sleep. He stared at the small holophoto on his desk, a woman and a child smiling in sunlight that no longer existed. His wife, dead 15 years. His daughter, now grown, stationed somewhere beyond the rim. He hadn't seen her since before the Europa campaign. He closed his eyes and whispered to the empty room, "You'd have liked them. The Erythra. They still believe in beauty." The door chimed. He almost ignored it. "Come in," he said finally. Alara stepped inside, her glow subdued like moonlight filtered through mist. "I could feel your unrest," she said. He gave a tired chuckle. "You read minds now?" "No, but guilt is loud," he sighed. "I've done a lot worth feeling guilty about. You command, you decide who dies and who lives. That is not guilt, that is burden." He looked at her. "You talk like you've carried it." "I have," she said softly. "When our fleets first fell to the host, I chose to destroy our outer colonies, to keep them from being consumed. I told myself it was mercy. It still sounds like murder." They stood in silence for a long time, two commanders bound by ghosts. Then she said, "Perhaps redemption is not found in victory, but in who we save along the way." He nodded slowly. "Maybe that's enough." By the second week, the fleet was ready. Docked together, the human and Erythra ships formed a constellation of steel and crystal. Each vessel shimmered with energy, a fusion of design philosophies that had no right to work and yet somehow did. From orbit, it looked like a sunrise blooming in the dark. Selene watched from her cockpit, heart pounding. "She's beautiful," she whispered. Karu's voice crackled over comms. "You talking about the fleet or yourself again?" "Shut up, Tan." In engineering, Brandt ran the final checks. Reactor output nominal, shield harmonics stable, hybrid systems, maybe stable. "Maybe?" Yara asked. He shrugged. "Depends on your definition of explode." She smiled. "You've been hanging around pilots too long." Occupational hazard. The crew of the Aurelius assembled in the hangar, human and Erythra alike. Crest stood on the raised platform, his uniform clean for the first time in weeks. He looked over them, faces lined with fatigue, eyes burning with determination. "I won't give you speeches," he said. "You already know why we fight. You've seen what happens when no one answers the call." He paused, scanning the crowd. "This time, the call is ours, and when the galaxy asks what became of the Deathworlders, tell them we remembered." Cheers erupted, a deep, rolling sound that filled the chamber. For the first time in a long while, Crest smiled without guilt. Hours later, the fleet began its slow advance toward the outer edge of the system. The plan was simple: intercept the host armada before it reached the planet. If they failed, Erythra Prime would burn again, and this time, the heart might not recover. On the bridge, Yara monitored the tactical display. "No contact yet." "Keep scanning," Crest said. Selene's voice came through the comm. "Vanguard wing ready. All fighters accounted for. You give the word, we'll make them bleed." Crest's lips tightened. "Let's hope they still can." He looked at Alara, who stood beside him. Her expression was unreadable, her light calm. "They will come," she said. He nodded. "Then so will we." That evening, before battle, the fleet fell into radio silence. For 1 hour, the void was peaceful. Engines dimmed, lights low, ships drifting quietly. Crest sat in his chair, eyes closed. Selene played soft music over the secure channel, an old Terran melody, grainy with static. Some of the Erythra joined in, harmonizing with voices that sounded like crystal wind. It was strange, Crest thought, how even at the edge of extinction, humans still found time to make noise. When the first sensor alarm blared, it sounded almost gentle. The host fleet appeared in the distance, black silhouettes against the sun. Thousands of ships moving in perfect formation. They advanced without warning, without message, without mercy. Crest straightened. All hands to battle stations. Lights shifted to crimson. Engines roared to life. The Aurelius trembled, alive again with purpose. "Alara," he said. "The Heart's Pulse network is ready?" She nodded. "It will respond when called." Then it's time to remind the galaxy what happens when Deathworlders bring light. The stars above Erythra Prime dimmed as the host fleet arrived. They came like a storm across eternity. Thousands of ships in perfect silence, each one a black spire of living metal. Their formation blotted out constellations. It wasn't an army, it was an extinction made visible. Admiral Crest stood on the bridge of the Aurelius, jaw set, hands clasped behind his back. The light from the tactical displays cast deep shadows across his face. "Range?" he asked. 70,000 kilometers in closing, Yara said. Her voice held a tremor she tried to hide. "Signal the fleet. Execute Formation Omega." Across the void, the Allied ships moved as one. Human cruisers rolled into position while Erythra vessels pulsed with newborn radiance, their crystal hulls humming with energy. Between them, hybrid frigates flared like miniature suns, the children of two worlds standing between life and oblivion. Crest watched the display and felt a strange calm settle over him. He'd spent his entire life preparing for wars someone else started. This was different. This time, the enemy was silence itself. In the fighter bay, Selene tightened her flight harness. The hum of her hybrid fighter, Eclipse 2, vibrated through her bones. The cockpit around her was alive, threads of light running through the hull like veins. The machine breathed with her. Karu's voice came over the intercom. "You sure this thing won't melt when you hit the throttle?" "If it does," she said, "I'll haunt you." "You already do," she grinned. "Good. Then this'll be familiar." The launch rails glowed blue. Her ship catapulted into space, followed by a swarm of fighters, humans and Erythra side by side. The sky filled with trails of fire. The host opened fire first. Beams of dark energy swept through the formation, slicing one of the hybrid frigates clean in half. Crest felt the deck tremble as shockwaves rattled the Aurelius. "Return fire," he ordered. Human cannons roared. Erythra ships answered with pulses of pure light, refracting through crystal arrays that split the beams into rainbow-colored death. The void itself seemed to shatter. Yara called out targets, her voice rapid, precise. "Carrier Group 4 neutralized. Dreadnought at Vector 830. Crest's reply was calm. "Focus the last light battery. All ships, converge fire." The Aurelius's main gun charged, a weapon built from stolen host cores and Terran engineering arrogance. When it fired, the beam tore through space like a spear of the sun. The nearest dreadnought disintegrated. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then the host adapted. Their ships shifted formation, black surfaces rippling like oil. They began to emit harmonic waves, a soundless frequency that made human skulls ache and Erythra crystals flicker. Alara, on the command deck beside Crest, clutched her chest. "They sing," she gasped. "They are trying to unmake the light." Crest barked, "Counter it." She closed her eyes, focusing. The veins across her body glowed brighter, answering with a resonance of her own. The Aurelius vibrated violently as human technology and Erythra energy collided. Metal groaned. Consoles flickered, but the crew held their posts. Alara's voice trembled but steady. "I can hold it back, but not for long." Crest turned toward her. "Then we'll make it count." Selene's squadron wove through the enemy line. She saw host drones erupt from the dreadnoughts, swarms of metallic insects, thousands strong, moving with terrifying precision. "Vanguard, break formation," she shouted. "Target the swarm." Karu peeled off on her wing. Plasma bolts streaked between them. Every explosion painted the dark in brief, beautiful chaos. "Eclipse 2, you've got 6 on your tail," he called. "Working on it," she said, rolling hard to port. The G-forces pressed against her chest, her vision blurred. She slammed the throttle, dove beneath a host cruiser, and fired into its belly. The explosion ripped through its core, scattering debris across the void. Karu's laughter filled the channel. "Still alive? Give me a minute." "Can't. They're charging something big." On the Aurelius, alarms screamed. "Admiral," Yara shouted, "they're powering a Genesis device." Crest's eyes snapped to the display, a massive host dreadnought in the center of the formation, its core swelling with red light. If it detonated, it would sterilize the planet and everything in orbit. Crest's voice cut through the panic. All ships, concentrate fire on that dreadnought. We stop that weapon, or this war ends right here. Selene's voice crackled through the comm. Then we'll do it manually. Negative, Crest said. You won't survive a direct strike. Neither will anyone else. The channel went dead. She turned to Karoo. You with me? Until the end. Good. Let's give them something to remember. They accelerated straight toward the Genesis ship. Post-interceptors swarmed to intercept, but Selene's squadron cut through them like fire through snow. Targeting core, Karoo said. Arm the torpedoes. The ship's AI chirped a warning. Probability of survival, 0.3%. Sounds like decent odds, she said. She smiled. Not out of courage, but peace. Then she fired. Crest watched from the bridge as a blinding flare erupted across the viewports. The Genesis dreadnought bloomed into white fire. The explosion spread outward, swallowing everything in its radius. Enemy drones, cruisers, light itself. When the glare faded, half the host fleet was gone. Yara whispered, "They did it." Crest couldn't answer. He stared at the empty space where Selene's signal had been. Alara turned toward him, her light dim with grief. She saved a world. He swallowed hard. She saved us. The surviving host ships regrouped. The largest of them, a vessel shaped like a black cathedral, moved forward. From its hull, an enormous figure emerged, projected as light, a humanoid silhouette of shifting darkness. It spoke without sound, yet everyone heard it. You are not the first to defy us. You will not be the last to fall. Crest stepped forward. I've heard better speeches. The entity's form shimmered. You misunderstand, Deathworlder. We are not vengeance. We are correction. Then you're overdue for a mistake. Crest turned to Alara. Can the heart reach this far? Her light flared. Yes, but it will cost me. He didn't hesitate. Do it. The Erythra leader stood at the center of the bridge, eyes closed. Her body began to radiate brighter and brighter until the light filled the room. Through the planet below, the heart responded. A pulse of silver energy rising through the clouds and into the heavens. The host fleet faltered. Their black hulls began to fracture, threads of light slicing through them. The darkness screamed, not with sound, but with the agony of something that had never felt pain. Alara's voice echoed in Crest's mind. Hold them, Admiral. Just a little longer. He turned to his crew. All guns. Everything we've got. The Aurelius fired until its barrels melted. The Allied fleet unleashed hell. Erythra beams and human cannons merged into one incandescent storm. The void turned white. When the light faded, the host were gone. Only debris remained, shards of shadow dissolving into nothing. Crest exhaled, shoulders slumping. Status, Yara's voice shook. Fleet holding, casualties heavy, but it's over. He looked around the bridge, scorched panels, exhausted faces, eyes red from tears and smoke. Then start counting the living. But something felt wrong. He turned. Alara was collapsing. He caught her before she fell. Her body was dimming, the light fading from her skin. Alara, stay with me. She smiled faintly. The heart is stable. The world lives. You're not done yet. Her voice was barely a whisper. All energy must return. My light was borrowed. Crest shook his head. No, we'll find a way. She touched his face, her hand warm and weightless. You already have. You remembered what mercy looks like. Her glow flared one last time, and then she was gone, dissolving into a cascade of silver motes that drifted upward, as if returning home. The Aurelius hung silent. Outside, the shattered remains of the host fleet glimmered like distant ash. The battle was won, but victory felt hollow. Crest walked to the viewport, resting his hands against the cold glass. The planet below shimmered with faint auroras, the heart's pulse spreading life through its wounded core. Yara approached quietly. Admiral, the Council's requesting a status update. He laughed softly, a sound without joy. Tell them we're busy burying heroes. Hours later, when the fires cooled, the survivors gathered in the hangar bay. Humans and Erythra stood together, the air heavy with loss. They projected the names of the fallen onto the bulkhead, a wall of light stretching from floor to ceiling. At the top, in bold letters, Captain Mira Salai. Crest stepped forward, holding a fragment of her fighter's wing. He placed it against the wall and whispered, You kept your promise. 17 marks. For a long time, No one spoke. Then Brant started humming softly, an old Terran song from the Europa colonies. One by one, voices joined, human and alien alike, a chorus of grief and gratitude. It wasn't mourning, it was remembering. When the ceremony ended, Crest stood alone at the viewport once more. The Erythra sun rose slowly, weak but golden. He thought of Selene's laughter, Alara's light, and the impossible alliance forged in fire. He opened a new log entry. They called us Deathworlders. We proved them half right. We came from a world that kills, yes, but we learned to save with the same ferocity we fight. If the galaxy still believes fear is stronger than compassion, let them remember what happened here. Let them remember that when the Forsaken fleets returned, we answered. He closed the file and watched the dawn spill across the wreckage. The universe felt very quiet, but for the first time, not empty. The war ended not with parades or fanfare, but with silence. After the host fell, the galaxy seemed to hold its breath. For the first time in centuries, there were no distress calls, no burning colonies, no retreat signals echoing through the dark. The stars simply watched. The Aurelius drifted above Erythra Prime, scarred and battered. Her hull was patchwork, her engines held together by faith and clever hands. But she lived, and for her crew, that was enough. The reconstruction began immediately. Human drop teams landed across the planet, setting up atmospheric stabilizers and field hospitals. Erythra engineers walked among them, humming to the soil, coaxing the wounded land to breathe again. On the equatorial plains, where glass had once stretched for miles, forests of light began to grow. Silver vines twisting upward, their leaves shimmering with bioluminescent veins. The humans called them Solane trees. The Erythra accepted the name, reverently. Crest watched from orbit as reports came in. Villages were forming, oceans clearing, radiation fading. Every day, more signals blinked to life on the map. One more survivor found, one more community rebuilt. It wasn't victory, it was endurance. Brant sent an update to Engineering Command on Earth, attaching a rough schematic of the hybrid drive systems they'd invented. He ended the report with one line. Turns out teamwork's harder than war, but it runs cleaner. 3 days after the final battle, the Aurelius held a funeral. The hangar bay opened to the void, the fallen sealed in crystal casings that shimmered faintly in the starlight. Crest stood at the head of the gathering. His uniform was torn but pressed. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet, raw with exhaustion and reverence. They gave everything, he said. Some fought with guns, some with light, all with courage. When history remembers this war, it won't be about who fired first. It'll be about who refused to stop caring. He looked up at the stars. Captain Mira Selene, High Sage Alara Vec, you've earned your silence. The bay doors opened, and the casings drifted out into space, glowing softly as they tumbled toward the rising dawn. The Erythra began to sing, their harmonics echoing through the hull like a heartbeat. No one translated the words. They didn't need to. Weeks later, the council finally responded. Yara handed the transmission to Crest, expression unreadable. They're congratulating us and demanding a full debrief. Crest scanned the text and exhaled through his nose. Of course they are. Orders to stand down? She asked. He shook his head. No. Orders to return. They want to evaluate the implications of hybrid cooperation. Yara crossed her arms. Translation. They want to see if we broke any laws, saving the species. Crest smiled faintly. We broke all of them. On the surface, the heart pulsed beneath the capital once more. Alara's essence had fused into its core, her consciousness now intertwined with the planet itself. At night, the sky shimmered with faint silver auroras that the Lul called the sage's breath. Erythra children grew up listening to her whispers in the wind, lessons about balance, compassion, and the strange, fiery people who had saved their world. Human engineers built a monument on the edge of the great crater, a tall spire of fused metal and crystal. At its base, in both languages, were inscribed the words, "When silence called, we answered." 6 months later, the Aurelius limped back into human space. Her hull still bore the scars of the war, but her name glowed bright along the side, a badge of defiance. As they entered Solara orbit, a dozen ships fell into formation around them, escort vessels of the Zenith Armada. Crest recognized the configuration immediately. "Ceremonial welcome," he muttered. "They're making it official." Yara grinned. Think they'll give us medals? More likely a tribunal. But when they docked, no tribunal awaited them. Instead, the bay was lined with officers in full-dress uniform. A banner hung overhead. Welcome home, Aurelius. The hearing was less an interrogation and more a parade of politics. Crest stood before the High Council, flanked by hollow recordings of Erythra survivors, transmissions from the rebuilt world, and images of the host's annihilation. The chairwoman adjusted her lenses. Admiral Crest, you were explicitly ordered to maintain border neutrality, yet you intervened in a conflict deemed non-human in scope. Crest's voice was steady. Yes, ma'am. And your justification? He met her gaze. The scope changed. A murmur spread through the chamber. The chairwoman's mouth tightened. And if your actions had failed? Crest didn't hesitate. Then we'd still be the only ones who tried. Silence. Then unexpectedly, one of the junior counselors began to clap. Another joined. Then another. The applause spread until it filled the hall. The chairwoman said nothing, but she didn't stop them either. Echoes of alliance. Over the next year, the relationship between humanity and the Erythra transformed into something unprecedented. Joint research stations were established in neutral systems. Human recruits volunteered to serve on Erythra vessels, while crystalline envoys walked the streets of Terran cities, glowing faintly beneath the sun. Cultural exchange programs flourished. Erythra architects taught humans how to grow structures, instead of building them. Humans, in turn, taught the Erythra how to swear convincingly in 4 dialects. Newsfeeds called it the Luminous Accord. The galaxy called it the Dawn Pact. One evening, deep in the shipyards of Solara Command, Yara was calibrating long-range sensors when her console pinged. A weak signal, rhythmic, almost musical. She frowned. Admiral, you might want to see this. Crest leaned over. The waveform danced in familiar pulses. He recognized it immediately. Alara, he whispered. It's coming from Erythra Prime. The signal wasn't words, not exactly. But its meaning was clear. The heart endures. The stars remember. He smiled. Guess she found her way back. 1 year after the war, a joint ceremony was held on Erythra Prime. Representatives from over 30 species attended. The Aurelius hung above the planet, gleaming, now more symbol than ship. Crest stood beside the newly unveiled monument, a crystalline archway fused with human steel, glowing in both blue and silver. Behind him stood Brant, Yara, and what remained of Selene's squadron. Erythra children handed out fragments of luminous stone to each visitor. Keepsakes said to pulse faintly when held by someone who remembered the fallen. As the ceremony began, an Erythra elder addressed the crowd. Once we believed death was silence. The humans taught us that silence can sing. Then Crest stepped forward. We didn't come to change your world. We came because we couldn't stand by and watch another one die. If that makes us reckless, then so be it. I'd rather be reckless than right alone. The crowd erupted in applause, and for the first time in history, laughter rippled through a diplomatic gathering. For a time, stories of the battle spread across the galaxy. They were told differently on every world. Some said the Deathworlders wielded suns. Others claimed they spoke light into life. On Erythra, children told a simpler version. Once, when the darkness came, the humans roared so loudly that the stars woke up. Crest retired 2 years later. He refused all political positions and returned to the far frontier, a quiet world orbiting a red dwarf. There, he bought a small house with a view of the sea and rebuilt his daughter's old telescope. Sometimes when the night was clear, he'd look up and see the faint shimmer of the Aurelius's beacon passing in orbit. The ship now automated, a museum drifting among the stars. He'd raise a glass and whisper, "Still flying, huh?" The waves never answered, but the horizon always glowed faintly silver. 15 years later, at the Erythra Academy of Exploration, a new class graduated. Half of them were human, half Erythra, all wearing the same insignia, a single line of light splitting into 2, then converging again. A young cadet, human, stood at the podium. Our ancestors fought to prove they could survive. Ours fight to prove we can live together. The heart beats for all of us now. In orbit, the Aurelius transmitted one last message, a simple encoded tone that echoed across frequencies. When translated, it read, "When the Forsaken fleets returned, they found we were waiting." Far beyond known space, at the edge of the Orion Veil, explorers reported strange phenomena. Drifting light formations shaped like ships, glowing faintly in silver and gold. No one could explain them. Some said they were fragments of the battle. Others said they were guardians. A small plaque was later found floating nearby, perfectly preserved. It bore the insignia of the Aurelius and a single engraved sentence: "We are not the first, but we will not be the last to answer the call." On the anniversary of Erythra's rebirth, Crest's daughter, now a commander herself, stood before her crew on a new ship, the Salon's Light. Her father's old insignia hung on her chest. "Engage drives," she said. The stars stretched into streaks of silver. Behind her, the galaxy shimmered with peace bought by defiance. And as the ship leapt into the unknown, her father's words echoed across time. When the Forsaken fleets returned, humanity answered. And in answering, we became more than Deathworlders. We became the voice that said, "Not today." The engines flared. The universe opened. And somewhere in the deep quiet between galaxies, two lights, one blue, one silver, still pulsed in rhythm, keeping watch.